Not too long ago, I bought and reviewed the M3 MacBook Pro, and quite literally, it was one of the best MacBooks I had ever used and simply the most powerful and seamless computer I've ever laid my hands on. And call me crazy or worse, I did end up exchanging it and returning it for this older, slower, and downright inferior 13-inch MacBook Air. And it's not even brand new. This isn't the first time I've done this either. Previously, I did swap my iPad Pro to the Mini 6, my iPhone 15 Pro to the 13 Mini, and the one thing I've started to realize is that I really place an idiotic amount of value in smaller tech. And just to make things clear, I'm not saying you should be ditching your dope ass tech to go with something that's worse and smaller, because that's just how it is for me. What I am saying though is that just because something new releases, it doesn't necessarily mean that older stuff is necessarily bad. But to better understand why I swapped in the first place, it's good to know how I use my MacBook and why this tinier machine is better for me. In my use case, this laptop is my everyday and everything machine. I use this for watching content after a long ass workday, doing my online courses in the evening, FaceTiming with the grandparents before bed, and of course all of my content creation. The biggest thing for me though is straight up managing my entire YouTube channel with this thing. Like every single thing I do goes through this MacBook Air, whether it's writing a script, editing a video, doing any sort of business stuff, and just about every other day-to-day thing. And I will touch more on performance shortly, but it's easy to say for anybody who's not a power user like myself, this MacBook will be well beyond overpowered for that day-to-day stuff. But to answer the question as to why the hell I swapped to a downright inferior product, that's not so easy to answer. But really it does come down to a mix of the size of the machine, a RAM and storage upgrade, and a weird one is not really going down the rabbit hole of spending more money than I really need to. Let's be real, new stuff releases every single year in and outside of the tech space, and while I did get caught up in the M3 MacBook Pro hype, I did catch myself realizing I didn't quite really need all of that power. What I did need was some fat storage, a higher spec of RAM, and a thin and light body. In my case, well, the M2 MacBook Air ticks all of those boxes. Not to mention the M3 MacBook Pro with 36 gigs of RAM and 1TB of storage came out to about $4,000 in Canada, and by comparison, my MacBook Air with 2TB of storage and 24 gigs of RAM is about $1,000 less. The thing is though, I did end up getting this through Apple's refurbished store, which pretty much makes this brand new but at a good discount. And if you haven't checked out the refurbished store on the Apple website, I definitely recommend it. Now obviously the MacBook Pro is going to outperform the Air in just about every single way, but I don't think I quite care about all those bells and whistles like I once did. If we are talking ports though, it is majorly trimmed down with only 2 Thunderbolt ports and a high impedance headphone jack. And I do want to give a huge kudos to the headphone jack, since it's really easy to forget how good media sounds when you are plugged directly in versus a set of AirPods or a headset. But I won't pretend like there aren't some major drawbacks here with the MacBook Air, since there really is. One of them being the lack of ports you'd find on the MacBook Pro lineup. In my case, I'm definitely missing that SD card and the HDMI port. For myself though, I do mostly use my MacBook in a desk setup with some sort of Thunderbolt dock. Right now I am using this 17-in-1 dock from channel sponsor Minisopuru, which gives me back that SD card slot I'm missing alongside the HDMI ports to hook up my monitors and accessories. And fun fact, if you do have a baseline M1, 2, or 3 chipset, you can't have more than one external display, which is pretty wacky by design even for Apple standards. So when I do need it, this dock does let me have more than one external display, and I can just add it to my setup despite the MacBook Air's limitations. Across the front and back though, this does give me a good amount of additional ports like the 2 Type-C ports alongside a massive 6 count of USB-A ports. There is a healthy mix of USB 3.0 and 2.0 speeds, which I will leave a pop-up here if you do want to know the details. In any case, these are great for external storage connections where needed, alongside all my peripherals from my mouse, keyboard, light bar, and webcam. It does fit perfectly into my desk shelf itself, giving me a single cable setup for my MacBook at 85 watt power delivery. I will have this dock linked down below in the video description, and thanks again to Minisopuru for sponsoring this portion of the video. But getting back to a huge reason most people would even consider going to the MacBook Air is the design, build, and the sheer portability. Simply put, this is quite actually one of the most powerful laptops you can get in this form factor. Mine is the midnight blue colorway, and yeah, it does pull fingerprints like crazy, but I'm not going to be wiping my laptop down every 5 minutes. I think it looks badass either way. It does weigh just under 3 pounds as well, which makes it less weight than a lot of books. It's simply one of those laptops you'd be happy to take with you anywhere you go. And something that's easy to take for granted with this MacBook as well is that it carries full performance wherever I am, even if I'm not plugged in. Regardless of where I am though, it simply works and it works well. Now I don't care to spout off any sort of benchmarks or anything since this device has been out for a couple years now, all that information's already out there. Still, in my workflow, this really does everything I need it to, and it powers through all of my 4K timelines while editing. Yeah, it's not going to be as smooth once I've gotten to adding effects or even color grading, but it does still crush while editing. Not to mention all the other day-to-day stuff is practically smooth and seamless. And sure, you're not really buying this machine for gaming whatsoever, but if you really do want to, you can get by on certain games that aren't too demanding. And it's safe to say, for me at least, I'm really in love with macOS. Features like FaceTime are one of those things that I can't really go without. Not to mention the speakers on here are somehow actually incredible despite the size of this laptop. And not that a YouTube video will do it much justice, but here is a quick sound test. Let's not forget the webcam and microphone are actually pretty decent on the MacBook Air itself. I don't think anybody's really expecting voiceover quality here, but it definitely gets the job done. Now I'm definitely going to touch on some of the things I really don't like about this laptop, but first are the things I absolutely love. The first of which is obviously the form factor, which I already touched on before, so I won't go back into that. But the second to that definitely has to be the battery. I'm not really going to test this since that wouldn't be really realistic comparing my usage to yours, but even still, Apple says this will last about 18 hours. Again, it's not really something I'm going to test since I am docked most days anyways. The times where I am on the road, I've quite actually never had to bring my charger with me since it still has plenty of power by the time I get back home. And low-key, my third favorite thing for this MacBook is definitely the keyboard and trackpad. Apple still does it the best, plain and simple. Touch ID is so disgustingly useful, and the tactile keys are easy to fall in love with. So much so that I still use a Magic Keyboard with Touch ID when I am docked at my desk setup. And I do have to say, what I don't like about this MacBook, it's definitely not going to be my forever machine. Having just gotten this, it does cover me for just about every single thing I do now, but again, getting closer to the end of a project, I do start to run into some hiccups and it does slow down just a tad. And what I'll likely end up doing is holding on to this M2 MacBook Air as long as I possibly can, and whenever the new ones do hit the refurbished store, I'll probably end up getting a Mac Studio. And I mentioned it before, the lack of ports might be an absolute deal breaker for some people if you don't want to live that dongle life. Lastly, I definitely do miss that 120Hz display on the M3 MacBook Pro. It's not that big a deal since I am docked every day anyways, but that ProMotion display is still something to miss. Still, like my iPad Mini 6 and my iPhone 13 mini, this MacBook Air is the perfect balance of power and portability. This MacBook Air is nowhere near as powerful as the Pro lineup, but it's also not trying to be. And for someone like me who is a power user that much prefers smaller compact tech, I'm just happy this thing even exists. But if you do want to have a conversation about this down below in the comment section, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. I appreciate you all watching till the end. Till next time.